before we were colonized, right, various African nationalities lived in what is today known as SouthAfrica through the length and breadth of South Africa. The evidence is conclusive. For example, in the Eastern Cape, we all know there were at least 8 major wars that were fought by the people of the Eastern Cape resisting infiltration by the foreigners, the settlers, right? So when that happened, whenever they went, we lost, and we lost the war, they confiscated the land.
Yeah.
So the strategy was fight with them. When they lose, you confiscate the land and push them all the way back. For example, Zululand was annexed in 1879, right? So long after 1652, we all know why there was resistance, especially by Shaka in those areas. There is not a single part of South Africa that was handed over to European settlers. We fought for our land, right? So that's the...
Now, Judge Dr. Hlophe, you are known to be passionate about the issue of the land, which you spoke about earlier on.
Yes.
What's your view on the land as it stands here currently in South Africa? You've got the constitution right in front of you.
Thank you. May I
I'm
drink
sure you'll
water
open,
first?
you may. I'm sure you'll open the constitution at some point to refer us to the clause in the constitution that speaks about the land and where we find ourselves in as a country and what do we need to do to change the status quo.
Well, thank you very much, Princess Mauto. That's a very important question. I'm very passionate about land. Fellow South Africans, I brought this constitution today because I believe the answer to land lies exactly in the constitution. Now, a lot of people are not legally trained. I'm going to explain something now. Allow me to do that.
Yeah.
A constitution is an act of parliament. The only difference between a constitution and other acts of parliament is that this is the supreme law of the land. Section 2 of the constitution says that. In other words, there is no other act of parliament. If that act conflicts with the constitution will prevail. It is the supreme law of the land, right? That's the first thing I want to say. Secondly, a constitution is an act of parliament. It was passed by parliament. So when you interpret the constitution, it is interpreted in exactly the same way as you would interpret other acts. Whether it is the Criminal Procedure Act of 1977 or the Divorce Act, it doesn't matter. The principles of interpretation are exactly the same.
Yeah.
In other words, you do not, for argument's sake, say, all right, Section 26 of the Constitution deals with housing, and you just go to Section 26. You look at other provisions, including the Preamble. Remember, there is no right which is absolute.
Yeah.
For example, you have got the right not to be defamed by me, right? You've got the right to play your music at home, but the moment you play your music in such a way that it disturbs the entire neighborhood, you are committing a nuisance. There is no right which is absolute.
Absolutely.
Now, having said that, let's go to the Constitution. Our Constitution is very clear. Firstly, I want to say, before I take you through the Constitution, before we were colonized, right, various African nationalities lived in what is today known as South Africa through the length and breadth of South Africa. The evidence is conclusive. For example, in the Eastern Cape, we all know there were at least 8 major wars that were fought by the people of the Eastern Cape resisting infiltration by the foreigners, the settlers, right? So when that happened, whenever they went, we lost, and we lost the war, they confiscated the land.
Yeah.
So the strategy was fight with them. When they lose, you confiscate the land and push them all the way back. For example, Zululand was annexed in 1879, right? So long after 1652, we all know why there was resistance, especially by Shaka in those areas. There is not a single part of South Africa that was handed over to European settlers. We fought for our land, right? So that's the background I want to give you.
Yeah.
And then Then came the Constitution. Oh, sorry, just before the Constitution. In 1909, the ANC was formed. Why it was formed? It was because, among other things, chief among other things, for forming the ANC was the question of land.
Of the land.
They were excluded. Quite rightly, the ANC leaders said, we are excluded, were black people, let's form the African National Congress. In 1959, the PAC was formed on the 6th of April. 11 months thereafter, on the 21st of March 1960, it was the Sharpeville massacre. Underlying the formation of the PAC was the question of land. 1976 Soweto uprising. You will recall that the first accused was Zeph Motupeng, who was the leader of the PAC. It just shows if in the 1976 uprisings, underlying that was the question of land. EFF.
Yeah.
EFF, you've just celebrated 10 years of existence. By the way, congratulations. You have done an excellent job in the country, right? Why was EFF born? It was again the issue of land and transformation of the key sectors of the economy. So I've given that long background. There is not a single South African who's fair-minded who can disagree with that. These are facts. Then came the Constitution in 1994 against that background. Now, let's look at the provisions of the Constitution. I'll be very quick. The preamble to the Constitution, it tells us where we're coming from and what we're all about, right? It says the following. It says we recognize the injustices of the past. It doesn't mention...
That's the Constitution?
Yes, here is in the preamble.
Okay.
Right at the start of the preamble to the Constitution, it says we South Africans recognize the injustices of the past. But it doesn't tell us what are those injustices. You and I know racism was grave injustice in South Africa. Black people were treated like trash, were not treated as human beings before 1994. The second injustice was sexism. Women were and still are treated not quite the same as men. There is clear evidence, for example, that in certain areas of employment, women earn less than men, right? That's discrimination, right?
That's what you experienced back in the days.
Yes, that's what we experienced back in the days, but there is evidence that there are certain employers or certain sectors in the economy, even today, which pay women less than men. That is undoubtedly another evil of the past, which existed, is still existing. Land. I've given you, with due respect, a detailed history of how it started. Land is not specifically mentioned in the preamble as one of these evils of the past. But I challenge anyone who says land is not an evil. What were we fighting about? Since the formation of the ANC in 1909, PAC in 1959, Soweto uprising in 1976, EFF 10 years ago. What was the struggle about? It was not about tenders. It was not about living in posh areas. It was land. So the preamble to me is very clear, right? It guides us. It tells us, it gives us a sense of direction. This is where we're coming from. This is where we're going as a nation, right? Now, let us move. There are various sections as well in the preamble which speaks to social justice. I don't know how we can say we have social justice when there is no land, right? All of that is in the preamble. Now, I want to take the preamble and read it with Section 25 of the Constitution.
Okay.
I'm about to finish. Section 25 of the Constitution is very, very clear. It basically says there will no land will be expropriated from anybody except through an act of general application, and there must be payment of compensation. Now,
that's the current Constitution.
Yes, here it is. And there must be, it goes on to spell it out, how you pay compensation and so that you look at the history of the land, its use now, how was it acquired, and the value of the land and so on. I'm going to identify at least 3 categories of property to you now, which are lying there, which can be the subject of expropriation without compensation immediately. If a person is committing a crime in South Africa, for example, I have guns, lots of them, I'm a hunter, right? If I take any of my guns and shoot and kill you, the gun will be confiscated immediately, pending the duration of the trial. Upon being convicted, I will forfeit that gun to the state. I will never get it again. Why is that not done in respect of
The land.
Section 300 of the Criminal Procedure Act provides that any property which is the proceed of crime may be forfeited. We have endless beatings of fellow African people on these farms. Some are killed, others are buried in shallow graves. There is not a single farm which has ever been confiscated. That falls squarely within the Constitution. It will be confiscated in the interest of the public. There is no need for compensation because you have committed a crime.
Right.
Doesn't happen? Don't ask me why. I'm not a prosecutor. Prosecutors, remember, are towing the line by and large.
That's what Batoi said.
That's number one.
Prosecutors must assist.
That's right. That's just the first thing.
Yeah.
The second, nobody can quarrel with that. That is the law. It is there. In other words, if you are a Mr. Hlophe or Mr. X or Van der Merwe, whatever the name is, and you're abusing your workers or you're committing crime, that property can be confiscated without much ado. You don't deserve any compensation. I will give you a second category of property. When you look at Section 25, it gives you it gives indications of what are the things that we look at, the history of acquisition. I thought that's very exciting.
Yeah.
When, during the Second World War, when the Second World War ended, the colonels, those who were in charge in the army, were rewarded handsomely. They were given land, whereas our fathers were given bicycles and torches. If you are in KZN, not far from Moses Mabhida Stadium, where EFF will be launching the manifesto
On the
on
10th of February.
you just drive away, I would say, from Moses Mabhida Stadium, about 27 to 30 k's. There is a place near Balito. There is a place called Compensation.
Oh.
I asked myself last year, how did this name come? Clearly, they were compensating each other, right? That's the land. That will immediately tell you how that land was acquired. They went to the Second World War, came back, they were generals, they won, they took our land, they were compensating each other. Why can't we have that land back? They didn't buy it. Instead, black people were given bicycles and torches. We were fooled.
What an insult.
That's land that is readily available, the so-called compensation. Nobody can argue with that. Because when you look at Section 25, the criteria that I have referred to is covered.
It's covered already.
And then the last category I will give you, there are farms here which are huge. They are owned by people who have never even seen them. They live in Europe. They come here once per annum or once every 3 years. They are not loyal to South Africa. These farms, when you go through them, some is 85,000 hectares, 65,000 hectares, over 100 hectares. There is no doubt that people have been buying farms in order to take the land and keep it away from those who legitimately use it. Now, we need a proper land audit in this country because there are so many farms which are not gainfully used, but they were all acquired through illicit means. And it doesn't help to say, I bought it from so-and-so. We can go back to history. Where did that so-and-so buy it? So it goes back to original conquest and theft. So the issue of land is very important. I know I'm very vociferous, and I'm not going to stop until there's been a fair distribution of land and all the resources. We all know in terms of the Land Act, 87% of arable land was given to the whites, and we only have 13%. So I am saying land is a very critical issue, and we need to have an everlasting solution, and it can only happen because we address the issue of land. And I'm very glad that one of the EFF comrades, Carl Niehaus, is the only white person who seriously talks about land, in my view. We need more such white people because we need to be frank and talk about it. We need each other. Afrikaners need us. We also need them. So we must share the land equitably, regard being had to the history of how it was acquired, and also regard being had to the fact that not all farmlands is used profitably. There are so many huge farms that are not even used profitably. So I would suggest that the sooner we engage on an ongoing dialogue on land, the better. And my view is clear. Any political party that does not address the issue of land, they must re-examine themselves.
There you have it, guys. Our African leaders try to do their best, in their speeches, and try to make speeches that actually to show, their efforts in trying to help manage the challenges which Africa is actually facing through and has been facing through since the colonial times. And so we here to really listen to these speeches and to share our thoughts in the comments. And so whatever it is you guys think about these speeches, please do share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please share and like and subscribe, because that's the way you support Kwazemi as a channel, an Afrocentric channel, where we try to understand deeper issues in African history and hopefully develop a collective intelligence on how we wish to build the Africa we want to see as people of Africa. See you in the next one.